Hi, Denellen.
Hi, Derval.
After weeks of planning, we are finally here for CW4CJ 2025. How do you feel?
And I'm sure the whole world can see me grinning from ear to ear because finally we are at day one of the culmination of this process, sowing seeds of sustainable solutions. I'm so grateful that we've been able to curate a space where we can spotlight women led solutions and also center lived experiences as expertise, as is the case for our women in the Caribbean and beyond.
Yes, in 2022, we created a space to explore the intersection of climate and gender justice. And we're back here today to showcase the lived experience of Caribbean women confronting climate impacts and also working to dismantle inequalities. We showcase women, youth, and our allies beyond vulnerability, because we know that's a big part of the Caribbean experience, but we're showcasing them as experts, activists, policymakers, and community leaders. So we're here to honor Indigenous knowledge and homegrown solutions. That's a big part of CW4CJ 2025, sowing seeds of solutions. So as we return, we're also expanding our scope beyond the Caribbean to the global south so that we can learn from each other and support each other in our pursuit of equity. So,
Right.
Denellen, I am eternally grateful to you, the Global Yadi, for coming on board in an even greater capacity this year, knowing that you have been a contributor since the inception of CW4CJ. And, your energy and your focus has been invaluable through the weeks of planning.
Thank you, Derva. Let me give you your flowers as well. I have the utmost gratitude for you as a co-organizer. And so I'm happy to move up from the passenger seat of CW4CJ into the co-pilot seat with you in the cockpit. And so I want to thank you for your vision, your dedication, and your energy. And also, take the opportunity to appreciate the elevation of our partnership and as well highlight our supporters and our sponsors. So let me also say thank you to Girls Gear for their ongoing partnership and believe in the importance of creating spaces for women and youth in climate advocacy, and to our generous sponsors, Clara Lionel Foundation, whose generous support has made this year's conference possible. I want to thank you for investing in climate justice in the areas where they matter. And let me also say thank you to our wonderful community co-sponsors of C4WCJ, CW4CJ, who have helped to amplify the space across the region, the posting, the sharing, the promoting in the network, the people jumping on board, the solidarity and the community and the collaboration. This is all what it is about, culminating in this way. So I am really grateful that we're doing exactly what we set out through the theme, sowing seeds of sustainable solution. It's not just about the work that we do, but the way in which we do it collectively around solidarity and shared action together.
Yes, and then my expectations are high for a stimulating and inspiring next few days. And I must echo, a depth of gratitude to our sponsor, our key sponsor, the Clara Lionel Foundation, as well as Girls Care, and our vibrant community of co-sponsors. And I also must mention and acknowledge Oro Fraser, who has been instrumental since CW4CG in 2022. And I must say that, you know, I'm really excited about our carefully selected speakers as they bring to us their insights and their perspectives on the dimensions of resilience and as we unpack, the leadership experience as women functioning in this space. And last but not least, I have to thank our audience for showing up and engaging with us.
Absolutely. I'm always curious to know where our audience is from. And so I can see the comments on screen, people greeting each other in the chat. So we love the engagement already. So make sure that you're staying engaged, making a note of the presentations that are about to take center stage. And so we want the engagement happening in the chat at the end. But feel free to drop a flag and to shout out. I see a Trini flag already. I know Jamaica is representing. I see Tarika Drizdale and Emma. They want to get into trouble by calling out all the names. But welcome everyone, and please send the messages, send the reminders for others to join us in this space this evening.
Yes, I'm really happy to see the engagement in the chat. And this is a regional platform, so we're happy to see a wide range of participants.
Yes. All right. So I see it's carnival time in there. I see Jamaican flag, Guyana flag, Trini flags all over. So welcome, welcome, one and all. Invite more people to join. And so I don't know about you, Derval. Are you ready to get things underway?
Definitely. Let's go.
All right. So keep posted to the screen, guys. We have another video coming up for you, and we'll share more after this.
The voices of our ancestors. Inheemse perspectieven op klimaatrechtvaardigheid. Deze documentaire werpt een diepgaand licht op de unieke perspectieven en verhalen van de Lokono-gemeenschap in Suriname. Vanuit hun rijke culturele erfenis delen de Lokono hoe hun voorouderlijke kennis, kunst, taal en spiritualiteit een centrale rol spelen in hun strijd voor klimaatrechtvaardigheid. De film onderzoekt de uitdagingen die de Lokono tegenkomen door koloniale en postkoloniale systemen, de impact van klimaatverandering en hun voortdurende strijd voor grondrechten en culturele autonomie. Met eerbied voor de stem van de voorouders en een blik op de toekomst onthult deze documentaire hoe inheemse wijsheid cruciaal is in het aanpakken van de mondiale klimaatcrisis.
Wij praten over een kolonialisme, maar ik geloof niet in kolonialisme, omdat kolonialisme heeft twee uitgangspunten. Het kolonialisme is om de landen te exploiteren. Het tweede, het koloniale, is wanneer mensen verhuizen naar een plaats die niet bewoond is. En zij leven daar als kolonisten. Dat zijn twee dingen. Maar dat van Suriname is geen koloniale, want het was een autonoom land. Soevereine mensen leefden daar. En mensen die een ontwikkeling op gang hebben gebracht, die ze nooit meer terug hebben gehad om dat weder op te bouwen. Want de geschiedenisboeken van de Europeanen is helemaal vernietigend voor het bestaan van het inheems volk. En wij praten over de Lokono, omdat de Lokono de eerste bewoners waren.
So as this space is about centering community, indigenous communities, and groundings in climate justice as well, we were pleased to just give you a sneak peek or preview of the voices of our ancestors, indigenous perspectives on climate justice in Suriname. And it's a documentary that sheds light on the unique perspectives and stories of the Lokono community in Suriname. It draws from their rich cultural heritage, and the Lokono share in this documentary how their ancestral knowledge, art, language, and spirituality play a central role in their fight for climate justice. So the film explores the challenges they face due to colonial and post-colonial systems, the impact of climate change, and their ongoing struggle for land rights and cultural autonomy. So it honors the voices of their ancestors and it looks forward to the future. The documentary also reveals how indigenous wisdom is essential in addressing the global climate crisis. And so we want to encourage you to head on over to, not right now, but afterwards, head on over to the YouTube channel for the Caribbean Youth Climate Justice Coalition, as this documentary was produced through that initiative, led by Nirabni Salons from Suriname on behalf of the Young People for Action on Climate Change in Jamaica. So we do encourage you to check out that video, the documentary, after this. All right, over to you, Derval.
Thanks, Danalyn. So, the moment we've all been waiting for, we're about to jump straight into today's proceedings, and I have the honor of introducing our moderator for this evening's session. Miss Doreen Clark is a Jamaican environmental scientist and climate advocate, currently based in Barbados. She holds a Bachelor's of Science in Meteorology and Environmental Science from the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill campus, and is pursuing a Master of Science in Climate Studies with a focus on coastline management. Doreen has contributed to climate resilience initiatives through internships with the Barbados and Turks and Caicos Meteorological Services, working on climate bulletins, energy warning systems, and disaster mitigation projects across the Caribbean. Doreen is the founder of Youth Climate Voice Caribbean, and Doreen leads youth driven efforts to raise awareness and drive action on climate change, sustainability, and ocean resilience. Welcome, Doreen.
All right. Good night, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much, Derval. Thank you so much, Dana Lynn. You guys are doing an awesome job. So now that we've set the stage, now it's time to hear from the voices that truly matters. The women and leaders who are out there every day, every second, every minute, turning their ideas into action. Each of them bring a different perspective, a different story, but one of the things they all share tonight is a deep commitment to resilience and justice. As we listen to them, think about how seeds can grow in your own context. This year's theme is powerful, sowing seeds of sustainable solutions. And in the Caribbean, we know about planting seeds. Whether you plant seeds in your backyard, in your community, or in our movements, one thing we should all remember: when women plant seeds, they don't just grow food, they grow resilience, they grow networks, and most importantly, they grow legacies. With that, let's move into our panel discussion. Our first panelist for this evening, Dr. Paula Henry. Dr. Henry is a primary care physician and public health practitioner advocating for policy-driven solutions to climate change, currently serving as regional lead for women and family medicine at WONCA. Her presentation will focus on vulnerability and recovery in earthquake response. Dr. Henry, over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Doreen. It is really a pleasure to be here. As a matter of fact, I feel very honored to be among so many prestigious women, and all of us are doing the same thing. I also want to welcome the people who are listening in, because obviously they are also part of the journey. I just want everybody to know that I'm a primary care doctor. So I look at everything from primary care, looking at prevention from the very beginning. So I always speak with that voice, a voice of prevention. How do we prevent things from actually happening? And I'm going to present today on a story of resilience, that is Haiti. And if you will see up in my, can you see my pointer? Yes? It's pointing to the logo for Haiti and T Foundation. Okay, so you cannot see my pointer. Okay, well, on the top part of this slide is our logo, Haiti Foundation, a combination of the first part, Hey, which is for Haiti, and TNT, Trinidad and Tobago. And our story is called Rising from the Rubble to Shine Once More. And of course, the rubble was the 2010 earthquake that shook Haiti. Next slide. Right, so these are our children that we have from Haiti. These are actual pictures of our children. And this is at the end of the project after the school was opened. Next slide. So this is everybody knows about this earthquake, and everybody knows pictures of this. Next slide. Okay, so I want to tell you about this. So this is the orphanage. So so this is our orphanage, and you know what it looks like now. Don't forget the picture. So let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so I went in 2010 in Haiti. I was part of a medical team. I went there, right, as part of the Clooney sisters. You see that nun there? Okay, part of the St. Joseph Convent Sisters, because I was asked to restore the medical health center that they ran there. And of course, it was a very painful time because to go to the clinic, you'd have to find children screaming in pain because they were damaged by the earthquake. And I sat there and I said, Lord, no, this cannot continue. These children can be my children. Do something, do something. So, of course, that was March of 2010. I went back home, and there you see, this is next to me. You can't see me, but this is me on the left-hand side right there. Next to me, that is Tanika. Tanika was our attorney. She said, Dr. Henry, you just can't do things just so. You need to form an organization. And so we formed the organization, AT&T Foundation. And yes, that is the foundation that we did, based in Trinidad and Tobago, that we were the initiators and the founders of what we were going to do. And this is my team. I want to big up my team because they are my team of managers. They never took 1 cent. We met every single month and sometimes more frequently. And at the end in 2022, when we decided to close the organization, every single manager was at the meeting that day, I call it, and you know, everybody was there. Interesting. Next slide. Okay, so this is not a story about climate change, okay? But this is a story about disaster management. And I chose this particular project because it tells us how do we manage a disaster. And so most of you are familiar with the disaster management cycle. How do we go from the disaster? How do we respond? How do we recover? How do we prepare so that for the next disaster, God forbid that it will come, how do we prepare for that? And of course, the mitigation has to do, how do we do things differently? How do we build back better? Next slide. Okay, so this, we know what the disaster was. So first of all, we came together. We didn't do it alone. It was not about AT&T Foundation. So we had to build partnerships. We started off with the congregation of the Sisters of St. Joseph of Clooney. They're all nuns, right? It's an organization that is in 62 countries all over the world. You see there's the congregation from Haiti, the congregation from Ireland, the congregation from Trinidad and Tobago, and they were all contributing. We were all working together. All the sisters were working together to find a solution to what was going on in Haiti. Next slide. But as you all will also know, you cannot do it together. One organization cannot do it together. We have to do it through partnerships. So yes, we went to Haiti, but we started to link with different partnerships. So you see there, Food for the Poor. Food for the Poor was very instrumental, and they're still instrumental in this in this community, because they give them food and they also supply the instruments that you're going to see right? Fidesco is a Catholic organization that gives humanitarian aid, and you will see a lot of young people here. Those are people who have given their lives to go to Haiti. They only used to get like $200 US a month, but they were there, and they were from different disciplines. They were architects, they were engineers, right? And then Digicel Foundation gave us $2 million US, and they built this school for the children, which were 20 classrooms that you will see. And then Global Water Partnership that you see in there in the middle, they help us to develop a watering system called rainwater harvesting, to the point whereby we do not need water. We don't get any water. There's no water, there's no water provision there. We have developed water on our property. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is to let you know, you see monitoring and evaluation, just to let you know, please do not forget monitoring and evaluation. You have to monitor, you have to evaluate from the beginning of the project to the end of the project, and then going forward in longitudinal studies. And so one of the things that I want you to notice, that this is the partnership team. We never did anything alone. We always sat together in a room and we would brainstorm. First of all, we will come up with solutions and we would say, okay, what is the way forward? And then we would go forward. Next slide. Okay, so the first thing that we did was the search for the land. And you see here again, different partners, okay? The young girl standing in front, she was from Fidesco, right? And the young man standing behind us, he was also from Fidesco, right? She was an architect, he was an engineer, both doing the same thing. Then you see these Irish sisters there. So they were all coming together. We wanted to know, okay, what land? Tell us about the land we should get. So we decided that we were going to buy 16 acres of land in Haiti. And so we bought the 16 acres of land. We were told that it must be flat land. It should be land around a major roadway. So we did that. And for those of you who know Haiti, this piece of land was on the foothills of Montacabri, and just outside Quadabouquet. Quadabouquet was the main town close to us. So we bought the land. Next slide. This is just to let you know that the first thing that we did was that we secured the property with very thick walls. And this is the gate to the property. We decided to keep the original name of the quote-unquote orphanage, but no, it wasn't an orphanage anymore. We decided to get 16 acres of land and make it a sustainable project for the 600 children who would now be going to school there, and the 100 living children that we call the orphanage, but it was not really an orphanage. They just lived in, and we provided care, and we kept the same name, right? Next slide. Okay, so the first thing we did, of course, is that we had the drawing plans and we got help from everybody. So you'll see there, I can't point, I'm so sorry, but on the right-hand side, the top right-hand side, that was the primary school for 600 children who came to the school. We did it in phased development. Of course, you all will all know that phases that is the best way to go. Do phases so you don't get stressed out at all. You see the playground in front there. The brown thing is the playground. And you all know that kids need ground to play. And we will see how big that playground was. And then, of course, we developed in the yellow, right? We see there was IT room, there was library, yes, kitchen and everything, because it was a living facility. I will show you a little bit more. And of course, the care homes and the vocational school, which is all the way down. We never got that. It was a very sad story for us. Next slide. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're going into the recovery. Okay, so we know that we had the land and we had to build, and the whole process, we know, build back better. So build back better. What does it mean by build back better? Well, we know that Haiti is very prone to earthquakes. It's also prone to the normal things like flooding and major disasters. So there you see the guy, they're building something here. They were building, was it the school or the care homes? This is how they build. Next slide. Okay, so this is an example of build back better. So on the top right hand corner, you see where we were building the bricks. Those are concrete bricks, right? Concrete bricks, okay? Concrete bricks. And coming up in the concrete bricks, you notice some steel poles. We double those steel poles and we embedded them in the concrete. So when the earth shakes, we know our building is not shaking. So this was built, right, using our European technology, thanks to Fidesco. And it was built for earthquakes. Yes, so when they say there's an earthquake, I said, don't worry, not our property, we're good to go. And then on the bottom, we see that we had solar, right? So we're using renewable technology. And because we don't get electricity on the grid in Haiti, it was important that we develop our own energy source. Next slide. Okay, this is an interesting, this actually picture was taken in Port-au-Prince, right? In one of the sisters' home in the mother house. And this actually is the Form 6. It's a school. And I'm showing you the Form 6 classrooms. And this is the school the day after the earthquake. Not even a single brick was cracked. And why? Because again, they were using new it was old technology, because this school was built somewhere like 1912 or something like that. And 100 years is still standing. It survived the earthquake. Those beautiful gardens, and that's what the gardens look like the day after the earthquake. And if in the top right hand corner, top, right, that is showing the beams. Okay, it's the same circle. You look at the red circle, you can't see it, but I showed you what the beams look like. And those of you who know the Twin Towers in Trinidad and Tobago, and you see the beams, so when there is an earthquake, right, the technology that they use, the buildings shake, they swing, but nothing cracks, because there are screws and opening gaps in there that would actually absorb shocks, right? So they take the shock, and nothing happens to a building. It stays standing. Okay, so we knew now what we had to do when we were building the new buildings. We had to put in this kind of structures to absorb stress. Next slide. Okay, so this again is part of the recovery. So I told you that I showed you the old orphanage, the damage, and it was really a little box-like structure. And I said to myself, you know what? Nothing creative could be created in a tiny box. You know, even if it started as a seed, even if you put the seed in the box, you know, you can't have a tree in a box. You need to put the tree in a soil and let it grow and expand. So we knew that we needed creativity. And that's why we got 16 acres of land. And this is why we did this structure like this. And this is why we have a large courtyard, because we knew that the kids were good in sports. We knew that children like to play. And we did this layout. We didn't do it. We got architects and engineers to help us. Next slide. The slide before, go back, right. So this is part of the recovery. It's part of Build Better. This is actually, you all don't forget, this is Haiti. These are our 20 classrooms. If you see here, there are 2 doors to each classroom. The old classroom, a lot of the classrooms in Haiti, at least in the public schools or, you know, some of the schools, there's only 1 door. And in case of any emergencies, you need 2 doors. You need 2 doors. That's the basic thing you will need in a classroom. So we were able in these classrooms to get 2 doors, an indoor, 2 doors, and that will help with, in case there was any emergency, to get the kids out. Another thing I want you to notice, well, you probably can't see it, but it's on the left-hand side of the building, right? There are these ramps, right? And that we build those ramps, right? Everywhere in the building we have ramps, and that is so that children on wheelchairs, right, they could come into school, be a part of the school, and be very comfortable. They reach in. Next slide. Okay, so this was before COVID, okay? And yet you see you got instructions about sanitation, right? And so that we were able to write on the walls what we wanted the children to do, big and bold, without telling them anything. Another part of sustainability and recovery. Next slide. Okay, this is important because this is the staff quarters, right? Built very elegantly, right? But it was built big like this, and so because we wanted the teachers and we also wanted the auxiliary staff to live in. So they didn't have to go home when the evening come. They may get to go home on a weekend if they wanted to. So we didn't have to depend on them taking transport. They actually lived here and we provided accommodation for the staff. Next slide. Okay, so this was the opening of the school, right, in 2015, and you see all the gleeful faces. You're hardly seeing me. I like to hide. I'm behind the white bubble on the left-hand side. Okay, but this is all our partners, and we were very happy to cut the red ribbon to open. Next slide. And we bless the school. Next slide. And these are the faces of our children. On the right-hand side, we had our primary school kids, right? And this, on the left-hand side, we had the kindergarten children. Next slide. And this we built afterwards. It's really the dining room. And that dining room holds, I think, 200, approximately 100 to 150, it's 200 children. And this was important to build this dining room because we gave the children of the school 2 meals every day. And the children who lived in, right, we gave them 3 meals a day. So it was important that they ate in comfort. And when we they will have their napkins and everything. So, we were giving them, we were elevating them, we were telling them, giving them world-class standards. Next slide. Okay, and this came later, but it was very important because, Haitians are very, very talented people. They're very good with their music. They're very good with their sports. And these were brand new instruments that we got. Food for the Poor gave it to them. And if you hear these children play these instruments, right, the sax and the drums. Next slide, right? And so you would see them play the sax and the drums. That is their teacher, who he said he would stay with them for 4 years and teach them. You hear these children play, and tears came to your eyes. They came to your eyes. These are our children playing. Next slide. Okay, and so then you ask us, so how we raise all this money? Well, in the Haiti Foundation based in Trinidad and Tobago, we held different fundraisers, and we actually raised close to $900,000 over the time, right, which is a lot for us. But in the whole project, we raised $4 million, and we did that from capital markets. I could tell you another story about the women. The women were, and not only the women in this project, but the women on the ground, the mothers of the school. I'll tell you all that another story when we meet, because we don't have time for that today. Next slide.
Dr. Henry, just a reminder, you have 1 minute remaining.
Okay, so these are the strategies that we did to build back better. You know them already, right? Next slide. Okay, we built sustainability into everything. Next slide. Okay, these are some of our success stories that you know about. Don't forget, we had 2 wells for water, and we had cisterns underground, and we collect water, rainwater harvesting from the wells. And we use that water. We sell water. We sell water. We don't buy water. We sell water. Next slide. Okay. This is the care homes, right? It is important because the children live, I don't know if it's in luxury, but there are 5 houses and their own. So there are 5 houses. Each house 20 children, no more than 20 children. Each child has their own bed and their own bedside table, and that's how they live. Only 4 children in each bedroom. Next slide. Okay, our policy position, the main policy position that we took is that the project must be owned. It must be owned by the people. So it was owned by the convent that we're doing it for. Next slide. Okay, education was very important to us. Next slide was a premium. Okay, these are the solutions that we're going to hear more about from other people, so no need to go there. Next slide. Okay, you're going to go quickly. These are the things that we didn't get, but we really wanted. We wanted to do a farm for the kids, but the nun said no, so no means no, because they own the project. Next slide. We wanted, this is the bakery, right? Bakery, but we didn't bake bread in it because they didn't really want the bakery that had concerns about getting it open. Fear that they would be raided. Next slide. We almost finished. This is our celebration in November 29. This is my team. This is at my home. Next slide. This is okay. This is just telling you, giving you a picture. This is the last slide. This is just giving you a picture of Mary Louise, who was a big Irish nun. These are the children hugging her. And this tells the whole story. Next slide is the end. Merci beaucoup. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Henry, for those eye-opening lessons. You've shown us that recovery isn't just about rebuilding structures. It's about rebuilding lives with policies that truly protect the most vulnerable. And yes, we see you guys in the chat. Solar panels, crops, awesome. And yes, they do sell water. They do love that farm idea. It's important to have food security as much as possible. Keep on typing in the chat. We'll move right along to our next speaker. So our next speaker, Mrs. Nicole Joseph Chin. Mrs. Chin is the founder and CEO of Miss Buffett TM and MBF Enterprises, and a Trimbe social entrepreneur advancing women's health, body empowerment, and gender-sensitive social care through global advocacy and innovation. Her presentation will focus on gender dignity and resource mobilization post-disaster. Mrs. Chin, over to you.
Hello and thank you. And, this is going to definitely resonate with so many of us this evening in itself, not just my presentation. I'm so happy to speak and to share. One of the things I want you all to imagine and envision is what happens when there's a climate disaster and the people of the Caribbean region or anywhere that is affected by climate change, which is the entire world, has to quickly react and respond, and particularly women and girls. And we're looking at the gender dialogue here. And specifically when women and girls have to quickly remove themselves from wherever that space of danger is and find themselves in a shelter. Imagine for a second, or maybe even half a second, what that looks like and feels like to any one of us who just recognize that our dignity has been totally demolished within the blink of an eye. When we start hearing reports that a hurricane is on its way, when we start hearing that maybe there's going to be some level of uncertainty with rain, when we think about the fact that people are thinking about social displacement and there's so much fear, then we have to start reimagining how we address climate change and gender justice, particularly around safety and security, particularly for women and girls. And I'll say this, usually men are immediately mobilized to help build back. They're also mobilized to do any kind of removal of debris and things like that. But women and girls generally rush or are rushed to shelters. And at that moment, that's where the vulnerability expands exponentially. Because now you're removed from your familiar space, and having been removed from your familiar space, what happens? There's that lack of security. Inside of that lack of security, there are also challenges around making sure that there is an ease of self-care. The biggest dignity challenge that happens when women and girls are literally immediately displaced following any natural disaster, and particularly climate induced, is that they leave with the only underwear they were wearing, if they were wearing any, the only hygiene items that they were wearing or had access to, if they had any. And then for the next day, week, month, number of months multiplied and amplified, their dignity is actually challenged tremendously. Their self-care is eroded, and they are at risk of many things, from care issues to safety issues, inclusive of and not limited to sexual violence. And sometimes that sexual violence happens in shelters by even people who they are entrusted in the care of. And this makes some of the most uncomfortable scenarios when we start to think about what it means inside of the gender dialogue, where it affects women and girls as far as social displacement during a hurricane or any kind of natural disaster. So I want to take you back to Haiti as well, because that's where it started in 2010. And in 2010, we were actually planning, in 2009, we were planning a trip to Haiti, not for any other reason except to engage with some of those communities that were already at risk and already inside of low income and poverty spaces. And inside of there, we were having great plans to connect with some of the medical institutions, some of the faith-based institutions. And then in January, the earthquake struck. And having struck, we had to change our strategy. And so we decided we were going to stay on the ground and mobilize differently. And we were going to mobilize for dignity because we already had friends on the ground there. We already had so many organizations that were already going in to support, including Dr. Henry. Thank you for the work you all have done and are doing. And so we didn't need to go and reinvent the wheel or replicate efforts. But what we needed to do now was to actually stay on the ground and help mobilize for dignity to happen. And so we had to make sure that we were networking strong. And one of the things I want to impress on everyone today is that there is so much power in the network. And if we understand the power of the network, particularly in the Caribbean region where everybody is somehow related to somebody in some way or other, we'll recognize that we're never far away, we're never remote from being able to truly intervene on behalf of our brothers, our sisters, our loved ones, our friends, and some of those folks who we don't even know, but who intentionally, because of the fact that we have one thing in common, and that is climate change, we have that one significant common thread that says, let's help each other regardless. And so, picture for a minute that woman during her menstrual cycle having a challenge with getting access to clean underwear, clean undergarments in hot, sticky environments, especially when we're clustered in a shelter and when particularly there might be limited water hygiene and there may be limited access to even soap and washcloths and things like that. You now have this additional layer of not being able to change your underwear. And that in itself meant that we had to deal with the whole discussion around how do we drive that dignity into an action that will be sustainable. So it started in 2010 and we collaborated, we partnered, and one of the amazing things that we found a way to do was to also celebrate those women even inside of a disaster experience. And so the University of the West Indies, this language learning department, what they did, CLL, the Center for Language Learning, they partnered with Miss Prophet, and we asked them to help us to write the most amazing Creole messages. And so the students at CLL and the professors, faculty and staff got together with us, collaborated with us together with communities around fashion and all the other institutions around us that make something happen when we do have a challenge. And we got together and we got to handwrite those messages that they helped us to translate on every single garment that we actually were able to secure through drives and through other activities and send to those communities and women in Haiti. So we got handwritten messages of endearment, of courage, of hope, sent and delivered. And we knew our friends on the ground would deliver. And so that's where the network and the partnerships and the participation came. Fast forward to Hurricanes Maria, Ivan, and recently Beryl. And what we've been also focused on again is engaging in that dignity and safety dialogue. And so what we've done is also partnered with some of our other international friends like Safe City to use the app, to download that app so that you can report incidents or any incidences of violence or violations, or if you feel vulnerable, even more vulnerable. And do you know, especially women, do you know, and you can identify right in this minute, with not where the thought actually, not let's not say it's happening already, but with the thought of not having access to clean clothing, and especially your first layer. And Miss Braffett, what we do is we actually expand the discussion around breast health and breast care, and what best way to engage women, and particularly women who are inside of a at risk space, and girls, to feel that sense of security because of the fact that they have on that one layer that protects us from most visual discomforts, as well as from any kind of visibility that makes us feel vulnerable. And so some of the images on the screen would be our conversations and education, because one of the ways to bring about dialogue is to really educate. So the very far bottom where you see A, B, C, D, that was our first bra collection drive together with our not-for-profit 2 Cups of Care. And what we did was we had a bra collection drive, which is what we continuously do around the year. But we don't just do it because we want to send bras to somebody or we want to send undergarments to someone. What we do is we collectively make sure that they are gently used or brand new. And then we discuss how we are going to educate so that delivery of these items are not just for the sake of saying we dropped off 50 bras in a community center, or we gave 30 bras to young girls, or we gave 10 panties to women because we want to deal with all the menstrual hygiene and all of that kind of thing. So 7 years ago, you would have seen where on this marker, on this day, we would have thanked some of our friends for supporting and participating. And then in 2010, you would have seen where we would have thanked our bra donors, and particularly because we were sending products in batches. So we were sending a batch at a time. And these were giving folks that whole sense of, I don't have to worry about water because I have a change of underwear. I don't have to worry about the next time I get any sanitary napkins, access to them, because I have access. And so we have to be very, very deliberate. And we have to also make sure that our friends are part of this dialogue and part of the sharing. So when we speak to women, we are also speaking to the men. We're speaking to the fathers, the husbands, the uncles, the brothers. We're speaking to the CEOs. We're speaking to the partners that we have inside of the spaces where they can fund some of these activities, so that at the end of the day, it's also not an isolated activity, but it's collective. So everybody feels that they've done something. And, this last year, around this time, we were literally mobilizing with friends who had boats, who had access to flights, who had everything that we could possibly get. And because the hurricane season is so unpredictable, and it goes so quickly when it does happen and start, that we had to literally have our fingers on the pulse with every single partner and peer that we have inside of the space of advocacy and engagement with regard to social care and impact, so we could get everybody to be doing what we needed them to do. So imagine having to catch a flight to send these things quickly and realizing that the flight leaving at 3 o'clock and it's on a Saturday. And this is like 10 o'clock in the morning and we have everything packed up, but we only got the call maybe like around, let's say about 11:30. And we have to make sure that everything is packed on the flight, that everything is weighed so that nothing stays behind. And then what we have to do is make sure that somebody is on the other end so that when it gets there, there is no holding back. Because one of the other things you find that happens with aid, and particularly when there's an urgent situation, is that sometimes things get prioritized and the perishable things are prioritized. But there's nothing more perishable than a woman whose hygiene is in need. because we have to deal with things like odor, care, any kind of viral or issues around sensitivities with our skin and what could happen as a result. And so we have to also be very careful when we're addressing situations around care. And that's why it has to be hygienic. That's why it has to also be carefully packaged and managed. And so when we start networking with our friends and we ask for help, one of the things that we ask is that when you're sparing that time with us, that you understand that we're doing this from a position of love. And that's why when CLL was so kind to help us with the translation in Creole for the messages that we wanted to give to these women with regard to hope, it was a no-brainer, because it was like, yes, we need to also tell these women we're sending something for you. But we're not just sending something for the sake of sending it. We want you to have a message that tells you that we understood what just happened. We are with you in solidarity, and that we will continue the conversation with you because we really, truly care. So, of course, the entire region gets affected by any kind of climate issue. It's never isolated. Even if it happens on a particular terrain or territory, it comes back to all of us because the region is already so small. We're already so deeply connected by ways of even our networks, our university network, and so many of the other networks that are also not just from the perspective of friendships, but from the corporate spaces and academia. And so what you find is that the more we collaborate and put our actions and efforts collectively into action, we are going to be able to save the region with more effort and more productive efforts, as opposed to feeling overwhelmed, isolated, and of course, unable to fulfill these particular and specific needs. The safety of women and girls during a crisis cannot be overemphasized. Inside of shelters, sometimes you never hear of the sexual violence or the neglect or the abandonment that happens, because everyone starts to feel that they need to self-care and they need to actually just survive. And inside of that survival mode space, sometimes some of the most unfortunate things happen. If it is that we are aware that things like that are happening, we also need to understand where advocacy comes in. And this is again why one of our key roles is also to bring about that dialogue and have education at the forefront of every single thing that we do. So how do we educate? We educate by bringing about conversations around the dialogue about safety. We educate by talking about breast health, body care, and hygiene, and then not just talking about it, but having the applicable actions done that will show how it is going to manifest as something that gives people not just that comfort and confidence, but that sense of care.
Miss Brock,
So,
you have 40 seconds remaining.
yes, and so what we have to do is make sure that we are really reflective about what happens when we have a climate challenge and disaster in the Caribbean and in the global south. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Buffett. Your passion shines through and your message was so clear. Dignity and care are not optional in disaster response. They are essential. Something else that you said that stood out for me was there's so much power in network, truly inspiring. And I see the chat. There's nothing like the power of Caribbean sisterhood, leveraging networks to promote women's rights and dignity. Such a great message. Thank you so much. We'll be moving right along to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Miss Ivy Chebiwat Kese. She is a Kenyan communication specialist with expertise in corporate communication, journalism, and communication for development, focusing on youth and women's empowerment and climate resilience. Guess what, guys? She is joining us right now from Kenya. So it may be lovely to highlight we just want to, shed light on the global south, the diversity and their efforts, because guess what? It is now 1:30 a.m. for her. Look at that, the commitment. Miss Kese, over to you. Can you hear us? Miss Ivy, can you hear us? Are you there?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Perfect. You could go right ahead.
Are you able to see me?
Yes.
Hi, Doreen. Are you able to see me?
No, I am not seeing you, but I could hear you. Could you please put your camera on for us? Can you hear us?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Perfect. We're not seeing you as yet. Let me just give it a couple seconds. You're muted if you're speaking, Miss Kese. You're muted. Perfect. You're unmuted.
Something is wrong with my camera. I'm trying to see how I can manage it.
Okay, you can go right ahead and start. You could just turn.
Wow.
You could just start talking if that's okay.
I'm sorry about it. But I would really love to actually see myself so I could communicate better. Anyway, thank you so much, Doreen, for the opportunity to actually interact with the community out there and to voice, especially what is happening back here in Kenya. So I'm really going to talk about women in coffee and how participatory communication is a major tool that is really impactful when it comes to climate change and its resilience. Just to take you back and to make you get a context of what is happening, so that I introduce the participatory communication, which is the main topic of discussion in my presentation. Just to mention that coffee in Kenya, you find that 70% of the contributor is the woman. So you find that the women contribute 70%, but you realize most of the 70% only applies in the farm. But when it comes to the production until the end product, we lose the women at some point. So that means they are not involved. That's why I bring in the aspect of participatory communication, which ideally entails that all stakeholders must be involved in the decision making process. When it comes to policy making, every stakeholder must be involved. And when they say it's only the shoe wearer who knows where it pinches, at this point it's the farmer, and in this case it's the woman, because she's literally in the farm all day but never gets to touch the money, never gets to understand, I mean, post production, what happens. But then if they knew, I mean, the know-how of how to actually get better yields, by now we understand that coffee production has been affected, especially at the farm level, because of climate change issues. We have low production, we have pests and diseases coming into play. We have little or no knowledge about how to manage how to manage climate issues, because we are facing them right now. So it is upon the women right now to be able to get access to funds. You can only get access to funds if you know the know-how on how to manage the farming itself. So participatory communication, in the sense that the woman needs to be involved in all decision making. When they are doing policy, when they are doing knowledge building, the woman has to be part of it. So I'll give a perspective of the Kenyan coffee. I mean the Kenyan women in coffee. I'm looking at just one area, which is an area of interest to me because I've worked with women around this region. So what happens is, most of the time when we go down to the field and we want to talk to the farmers, most of the people who come, like in the past, most of the people who would come were actually men. But then remember, the men are not found in the farms. So any information that reaches them is not trickled down to the woman. So we are coming to a point where we want to target the women let them know what is happening and what needs to be done, so that even when we're mitigating climate change, the resilience becomes very strategic. So I'll go down to what we've managed to do in the Kenyan context with the farmer being involved. So at this point really is to encourage the women to be involved when it comes to training. We call the women to come for training so that we have stakeholders like, say, researchers. We have agro dealers who talk to them about the best chemicals to use in their farms. We have researchers on board who also come to make them understand the best species and the best variety. I mean, the best variety of seed that they should use. Those ones, especially that are resilient to climate issues. Then we also have financial institutions that come talk to them about how to position themselves so that they may gain financial bargain when it comes to lending. So at the moment, what we are trying to do with these ladies is to actually have them sit together. Another thing is to also mention, just like what Nicole had mentioned earlier, that it's important for the women to have networking positions so that they're able to get peer-to-peer learning. Important to also note that old knowledge is very important. Most of the time you find that for farmers, they're so banked with information from the internet, yet we don't have the same farmers banking into the same knowledge by having peer-to-peer. So we've come to a conclusion that women need to sit together, have peer-to-peer learning where they talk about the issues that they are facing in the farms. They, from different regions, how they manage the climate resilience strategies that they use in their different farms. A good example is to also encourage the women to get into greening. We're at a point in Kenya whereby we are so much into greening, because remember that part of the issue that we're facing right now is deforestation. So we are telling the women it's about time we plant the trees. You can have your small piece of land where you have your coffee, then in between have the trees planted, so that we eradicate the issue of soil erosion and soil degradation. So we advise the women, we come together, advise the women that they should plant trees. In this case, you could have like avocado trees alongside with your coffee. At the end of the day, you're still gaining by selling the avocados, which is the fruit trees, and still gaining by the coffee. Because once you have good cover for the coffee, then it means your coffee will do well. If you're having good certified seeds for the coffee, it means your yield goes up. So it's about building structures, putting structures into place where the woman really understands exactly what they're supposed to do at the farm. We're at a point of also using the community radio. So there's a lot going on, and it's a point whereby farmers are learning a lot from community radio. Remember, community radio is more of solutions within a specific area. So like, for example, where we are right now, an area called Kericho, it's mostly dominated by a community called Kalenjin. So if we have community radio that we have women understanding the vernacular, which is the Kalenjin, they are more likely to get better information on how to mitigate some of these climate issues that we have. So this is very close to them, because at the same time there's feedback. They're able to talk back to the radio, and the journalists can air their issues. So remember, the same old knowledge that the women have down at the ground is still passed to the community radio, then it trickles down the information to the mass. These are some of the things that we're trying to do with farmers at the ground level, but also to remember that all stakeholders means also the agro dealers. So the agro dealers will also come on board and produce good fertilizers that are best for the coffee practice. And one thing I forgot to mention is that we encourage the women to participate in afforestation by doing especially avocado, because the same chemicals that you use on coffee is the same chemicals that you're going to use on avocados. So you're also looking at how you're getting your money stretched out, not having to spend so much, because we also have the money aspect, and there's a lot going on when you introduce money, whereby you're asking a farmer, you need to spend this much on fertilizer, you need to spend this much on spraying of chemicals and whatnot. But if the farmer understands that the same chemicals are going to be used for your coffee and your trees and your avocados, there's more of change of mindset, and they're willing to keep up with that. So we are also getting to talk to our community leaders at the ground level. Remember, the community leaders are the same leaders who are the catalyst for change. You're more likely to understand your community leader if you come from a specific region. If your community leader explains to you the needs to have climate resilient strategies, you're more likely to understand them, you're more likely to believe them because you speak the same language, you know each other. So empowering the community leaders becomes a very easy, a key point, so that the same information the community leaders are empowered with somehow is cascaded to the community. And you find that women, I'm very happy to mention that women right now have a sense of awakening whereby no woman wants to be left behind. Many places we've done training, you'll find that women are even coming with their kids carried at their backs, and they're able to sit through. You can imagine a lady comes to a training session where it takes about 3 days, and they'll come with their baby, 4 5 months old, to just learn anything that they need to understand and take it back home. So you can imagine the same woman who has so much patience, she has so much resilience, yet does not have her voice when it comes to sitting at a table where decisions are made. What I'm trying to point is that it is very important to have participatory communication among the women in coffee, because they have so much knowledge that will be very useful, especially in coming up with policies, coming up with laws that even govern, coffee, govern also, agricultural laws that are were supposed to abide by in the country. So their voice must be heard because they're important people in the society. They have shown the need, they have shown that they are ready to work. So it's about time that the voice is heard, and it's about time that the woman is heard and seen at the same time. So just to conclude, I'd like to mention that at such a time where we're dealing with so much climate issues and we're dealing with resilience, you cannot leave the woman behind. It's about time that our voices are put out there. We are shouting at the top of our voices, because our voices need to be heard, honestly. So I'm also encouraging every woman out there that it's about time. You need to be heard. Your voice needs to be heard. Uh, then also, we're trying to break the traditional barriers whereby the woman is only supposed to be seen in the farm. No, they're supposed to sit at a round table, discuss issues that are really pertinent, because we know at the end of the day, when it comes to any crop, ideally, contributes to food security. So it's about time that some of these things are discussed. So I'll end by just mentioning something. While I was going through, of course, the socials, I saw someone who mentioned actually a coffee farmer, I think from the south of, south of America, or is it central? Sorry, Central America. And he mentioned that land is life, and for me, I quote him, earth is a treasure. So he continues to say, I want to do something or have something for those who come after me, so my children can continue to live off the land. So you realize that there's a sustainability issue here. Once this land is taken care of, once the coffee as a crop is taken care of, then it means we also have value for the generations to come. It's not about now, but it's something that will also add value for even the generations that are yet to come. I think up to there, that is what I have to present. And thank you so much. I'm just sorry about the video issue, but I hope my voice was loud and clear.
Thank you so much, Ivy. A powerful reminder that peer-to-peer learning is very, very important. Your insights from Kenya, it showed us that women's voices can truly shape resilience on the ground to build a legacy for generations to come. And just to check the chat, I saw somebody asked a question if the recordings will be available. Yes, the recordings will definitely be available on Global Yardie and the Climate Conscious YouTube and Facebook. And you guys could also check TCCP's LinkedIn. So you guys could always go there to see the recording. We're going to move right along, and we're going to have our last but our not least speakers for the night. We'll have a combined presentation from Miss Maxine Aline Esprit and Karina Gomez. They are from the International Organization for Migration. And Miss Maxine Aline Esprit is a communication and community engagement specialist with the IOM, the International Organization for Migration. She focuses on disaster placement and rights-based approaches to human security in the Caribbean. Ms. Karina Gomez is a senior migration, environment, and climate change associate at IOM Regional Office in Panama. She specializes in participatory project design and indigenous community engagement around climate change, migration, and sustainability. Their presentation will focus on disaster displacement and climate mobility. Please welcome Miss Maxine Espert and Miss Katrina Gomez. Over to you both.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Good evening to all of the listeners. Um, we're so happy to be here this evening. I am Maxine. I am based in Dominica, but I work with the IOM Caribbean office, which is based in Barbados. And my colleague, Karina, is based in Panama. And so we are representing the South, right? So we're going to present this evening on dimensions of resilience, which of course is the theme, and looking at disaster displacement and forced migration. I will focus on the Caribbean, on some case studies from the Caribbean, and Karina will focus on the Gunayala indigenous community off the coast of Panama. So maybe we can move on with the either one presenting. Okay, great. Yeah, so just to give some data, because very often we find that we think we have a good sense of the situation, but really we don't have an overall look, and we don't understand really what the magnitude of things is. So in terms of disaster displacement trends in the Caribbean, in 2024, which is the most recent, Hurricane Beryl displaced at least 1,781 people in formal and informal shelters in the Caribbean. Between 2012 and 2022, looking at that decade, we see that 5.3 million, there were 5.3 million new internal displacements. So that is within country from one community to another, caused by environmental disasters registered in the Caribbean. In 2020, we had Hurricanes Laura, Eta, and Iota, where 2.7 million people were displaced in 14 countries. So that's sort of a wider region. And in 2010, of course, we know the earthquake in Haiti displaced about 6.5 million people. So those are just some figures that we are sharing. Next slide. All right, so go back. The one before, I'm going to allow some Caribbean nationals to tell their own stories. So these are some videos that we compiled for a conference a couple of years ago. This is 2023 information, I believe, and it looks at cases in Dominica, St. Vincent, Montserrat. Can we get the video going? So these are women sharing their own stories of displacement, and we will see some themes kind of arising out of those.
After 9 months, we moved back to Dominica because one, we wanted to come back home, and then our living arrangements was temporary, and still we was getting some issue with our auntie because it's like, children will be children, and then she does normally have to deal with children on a normal basis, like a living basis. So it is starting to get challenging for her. Now that we are back home, it's still difficult because when we actually get back our house, we just have to live in the workshop.
The only thing that I could do was pack up the kids, and at the time the ferry was coming get up really early and just go there hoping that I could get a space with the kids. It wasn't even guaranteed, but I just had to try. And I did get on. Um, my baby at the time, I didn't even have a birth paper or anything for him. So it's a good thing I knew somebody who wrote up a document, and then luckily I had a ping pong of the baby, so they just gave me a document that I could use to travel with him.
Normally procedures, plans, guidelines that are supposed to be used in terms of evacuating persons. And in order to ensure the guidelines, the plans, and procedures that are used for evacuations actually work, it is important to test them through simulation exercises.
Evacuation simulation should be conducted as a means of testing the people, and even to look at the, how we could say, the loopholes, the bottlenecks that may arise, that give a chance for evaluation, so that we could correct some things that may have gone bad in the event of a real hazard.
At that time, my mother, sister, and brother lived in town. And so they moved over to where I lived. But the eruptions continued and they progressively got worse. It was really crowded, but we had to do what we had to do. And at that time, I had a 10-year-old daughter who had epilepsy and a 3-year-old son. And I just considered him to be a baby. Because
Oh, all right. Is the video stuck? Okay. All right. So we were just actually coming up to 2 cases from Montserrat, and the Montserrat experience was very intense because the eruption affected, it's a very small island, and the eruption affected
I have the prospect of having to live in a church, a school, or under a tent. I can't do that. Not with a daughter with epilepsy and a baby. And the nightmares on top of that. And I decided, no, I needed to leave. So I decided to leave and go to the UK.
I was living in the because I was married to a police. We had this girl, a school child, who had to be on her own most of the time when we were evacuating, when we were on call and stuff like that. When you had that heavy ash fall, or the thunder, the lightning, the whole place turning black, all of us being scared. I applied for housing. When I went to the housing department, I was told we knew nothing of the Montserrat situation, so I was literally turned away. I would have liked for people like me who were called essential services workers to have a special place that you and your family can inhabit or live, that there were procedures in place instructing us of what to do if you had a family. If you're single, this is what you do. If you have a family, this is what is available for you and for your family.
So we had the pandemic, then we would have had the dengue, then we would have had the volcanic eruption, we would have had floods just after the volcanic eruptions where we saw some of the first heavy lahars coming down towards the end of April. We had our first explosive eruption on April the 9th, 22nd, thereabout, the explosive eruptions. Most of our shelters are schools and churches, community centers, learning resource centers. So we do activate those systems, that system, the shelter management system, open our doors for persons who may need a place to shelter. That's in the before and immediately after the impact. So it was the first time in at least in our operations here at NEMO, as we were established in 2002, that we have had some shelters being operated that long, and we still have a few persons around in one particular shelter remaining. And our government had policy of supporting persons who have been displaced from disasters over the years. We have had the housing program and rehabilitation program where homes are rehabilitated, homes are rebuilt, and people are relocated from dangerous areas, from riverbeds. From the volcanic eruption, one of the first things that we recommended and we did was to clearly have the physical planning department do the mapping exercise to determine which areas would be unsafe for rebuilding, because we know the volcano is going to erupt again, whether it's in my lifetime or someone else's lifetime, it's going to erupt again. And we do not want development taking place in these same areas that the lahars are going to come down, the pyroclastic flows are going to come down.
All right. So what we see from these stories and what we see from experience generally is that you have an environmental hazard, but there are different levels of exposure based on physical space, based on economic situation, based on family income, based on gender. Um, we see also that you add on to that all the different vulnerabilities, and then what you get is that you have an amplified risk of disaster and displacement when you have multiple vulnerabilities. And gender and indigenous people, those are two of the factors. We also find that people with disabilities also have very specific vulnerabilities that they experience, and that affects the impacts of disaster and displacement on them. Next slide. Coming out of the stories that we just looked at, some of the themes that we see coming out. Very often we choose, the first choice is normally to stay with family and friends. However, in experience, we find that staying with family and friends, there's a short-term experience and there's a long-term experience. And particularly when you are leaving country, you're going off island, you're going to a different country, so you have cross-border movement, you find that the risk of abuse, of sexual violence, of gender-based violence, of child abuse, emotional, financial violence, abuse can be increased. We also find that sometimes there's a loss of access. So sometimes people are reluctant to move because you lose access to potential government assistance, for instance, in your place of origin if you move. And so there's almost an incentive for the family to be separated, right? Access to documentation came up, including for children and newborns. In that circumstance, there was a newborn. So she didn't yet have any kind of birth papers, but luckily she had a picture. Now, luckily also, she is a citizen of the OECS. And so the policies sometimes can assist. So the fact that there's freedom of movement within the OECS countries meant that several people affected by Hurricane Maria found it easy to move with their license, for instance, or their social security card, even if their passport may have been lost. I was one of those. I ended up having to travel on my license to St. Lucia, right? And because we're citizens of the OECS, basically there were no limitations to the length of time that we could stay. We did not need work permits. It was much easier. We were able to access education. So several women, including myself, again, moved to different OECS countries so that our children could resume school, because this was 1 week after the beginning of the school year. The decision to move often is affected by the responsibility of care. So we saw in the situation in Montserrat, for instance, that she was speaking about the fact that she had a child with epilepsy, and she had a young baby as well, and there was no way she could live in a shelter in those kinds of with those challenges. It also means though that sometimes going to work is a challenge. So with Charmaine, we saw her husband was a policeman, she is a teacher, she had to go to teach, she had to go back to work, but then it meant that the daughter that they had was left in the police station on her own, and that was not a situation that she was comfortable with. So she felt she had to move. Now, what we found with some of the Montserrat stories actually is that they went to the UK because there was the opportunity for them to move. But one, there was no real system in place for them there. Two, there was a real culture shock, the temperature, the food, the level of discrimination. And so when you look at those stories in the long term, you find broken marriages, you find children where, you have a family with 3 children. One ends up being a drug addict, the other one ends up committing suicide, the other one ends up, some really sad long-term situations. Whereas from the Caribbean, we're sitting home and we forget, oh, these people have gone to the UK, so they're well off, right? And so you find that there are these situations that we don't often take consideration of. In emergency shelters with climate change, what we find is longer stays. And so you see in Dominica, for instance, that you have purpose-built emergency shelters now, and there is an even greater need for shelter management and rights-based shelter management that looks at gender and different, access, different bathrooms, for instance, and lighting around the bathrooms and making sure that children can be taken care of when parents may go off to work. Physical planning. So one of the things that I noted with the last speaker was that, of course, after the eruption in St. Vincent, one of the main things that they looked at was physically, where might the volcano affect again? But the considerations of the other aspects, like livelihoods, like community bonds and access to resources, those things don't necessarily take front stage at this point. So the full sort of human security approach to disaster displacement is something that is not yet fully being considered. Next slide. I'm going to just run through this very, very quickly. I'll share some resources afterwards. Our research has found that gender is a fundamental factor in displacement impact. We find that disaster situations, when there's displacement and when there are temporary accommodations being provided, there is a need for gender responsive interventions. We can move on to the next slide. I know our time is short, so I don't want to go too much into detail. We also find that there can be limited access to resources and opportunities, and that can affect gender-specific vulnerabilities and the ability of women, let's say, to return to their communities of origin, because they are the caretakers, they are the ones, they may be the single income earner working, taking care of the children, and so they're unable to return to their communities of origin because they cannot afford to have a break in income. Gender-based violence is a critical issue in all situations of displacement. We also find that there's a need for improved evidence and data so that we can really understand the situation. And this is becoming even more important because with climate change and our small islands, our small land masses that are often more and more, we are seeing the entire country can be affected by one event. And so it kind of forces cross-border movement. And how do we take care of data in that kind of situation if data is not comparable. So if you leave country A to go to country B, but they're unable to sort of share data and compare, then it can create a not so ideal situation. We need to create opportunities to promote and recognize women's knowledge, indigenous knowledge, and leadership. And just to recognize as well that responding to the needs of marginalized groups requires consideration of multiple and compounded vulnerabilities. The next few slides share some resources, research that has been done and that is available. I'm sure that can be shared at a later time, but it is just to let you know that if you are really interested in the topic, there are several documents that IOM has provided, and several studies that we've been involved in that can give you more information on some of the issues arising around gender and displacement of communities. The final one is a knowledge hub. You can move to the next slide. I don't want to spend time. So this one has some policy papers that have been done by civil society organizations that we liaise with. And the final one, go on to the next slide, please, is the knowledge management hub. Right, so this one is kmhub.iom.int, and that is a regional knowledge management hub on migration where you can find a repository of a lot of this data. So I'm going to hand on now to Karina. Karina is going to walk us through the Gunayala experience. The next slide just gives contact with IOM Caribbean. Like us, follow us, look for us. And Karina, the presentation actually just continues on to Karina's zone.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity. It's a pleasure for me to be here today. As Maxine Andoren said, my name is Karina Gomez. I'm a Senior Migration, Environment, and Climate Change Associate at the IOM Regional Office in Panama. I'm based in Panama City, and I am Panamanian. And today I'd like to share a little bit of the experience of Gardisadup. Gardisadup, next slide, please. Gardisadup is a small low-lying island of the Gunayala Comarca. It's the home about 1,300 people. And for years, the island has faced rising sea levels, overcrowding, and prolonged flooding. Storms have damaged homes, school, health services, and at the same time, access to safe drinking water and sanitation have become more difficult, increasing the health risk. But beyond, next one, please. But beyond the environmental pressure, we must also acknowledge the deeper root of the vulnerability shaped by historic inequality, because this Gunayala is an indigenous comarca, indigenous community here in Panama. Next one. What's truly stand out about the Gardisadup relocation is that the relocation process was not imposed. The community started the process more than 10 years ago through the Guna Congress and the traditional leaders. They identified land in the mainland and began working on vision for the relocation that reflects their own priorities. This local ownership ensured that the process respect their values, their traditional knowledge, and the way of life. And it's that key reason why the relocation moved forward, even amid the delays that they have. Next one. Some of the challenge, well, still the road was far away from easy. In 2017, the government commitment to support the relocation, promising to build 300 houses and basic infrastructure. And that delays, followed by 2023. Many critical services were still missing, and home lacked culturally appropriate features, like a space for extended families or bins to hang hammocks. The hammocks play a significant role for them because the hammocks serving as a connection between the physical world and their spiritual belief. And in the new houses, they don't feel well because they don't have that connection. And the school also remained in this island, so the children have to return daily by boat. There was no running water, no operational health center, in many cases, no job, because they depending of the fishing. The cosmology and the spiritual connection to the sea that is a central identity and livelihood of the Gunas was disrupted. Something that was a huge challenge was the language, because language was another barrier. Most of the residents of Gardisado speak Guna. They don't speak Spanish, and many elders in the community have limited formal education. And this made it to fully hard to fully engage with the authorities and to understand the technical plans. Also, because the elders are considered in the Guna culture as the people who are wise, and they believe that they didn't have the opportunity to speak. And also, some documents were translated into Kuna. The translation didn't know achieve optimal effectiveness and also have problems at the moment of the translation because the Kuna is a complex language and not everybody have the ability to translate in a proper way. This experience left behind mixed feelings of achievement, but also frustration and the need for a greater inclusion and follow-up through. Next one, please. Some lessons for the region is that the case of Gartisado offer important insights. It demonstrates that the planet relocation should be carried out with human right-based approach, one that prioritizes community leadership, participation, and dignity. It also underscored the need for national government to develop clear national plans and policies that go beyond housing, ensuring access to services, cultural continuity, and long-term well-being. And lastly, it highlights the role of the international actors in supporting the process by supporting as technical support, but not to replacing the local capacity. Next one, please. And looking ahead, it's essential to ensure that any relocation process is carried out with integrity in a manner that is dignified and transparent and inclusive. Infrastructure must be both climate resilient and cultural appropriate. And moreover, Gardisado may serve as an important reference point for informing borders, regional and national policies that promote climate justice and address issues related to human mobility. And it reminds us that the adaptation must go hand in hand with justice, and that when communities lead the process, the real solutions are possible. So that's all, and thank you very much for all your attention. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Miss Maxine and Karina, for your rich perspective. Both of you basically connected the dots between climate, migration, and human security. For me, it and for everyone else, very clear. You know, you guys gave us so much to think about as we plan for mobility and resilience. Those videos were very, very touching. And this, tells us that we should basically continue the work that we're doing to effect changes in our different communities and in our different countries. We're going to invite all the speakers to come back on camera, and we're going to jump right into our Q&A. I see your questions in the comments, and we don't forget them. We are going to address them right now. I'm going to invite all the speakers to come back on camera, and I will just highlight some of the questions that were posted in the chat. The latest one was addressed to Ms. Maxine and Karina from the presentations that you guys shared. And the question from the chat says that this has been a learning experience. Are the disasters management organization in the islands aware of the studies and learnings that you guys shared? So that's a question
Yes.
that's
So actually that video, the video, when I was preparing the presentation, I was putting together different things. And then I maybe 2 nights ago, when I should have been sleeping, I suddenly remembered this video that we used at a technical workshop of disaster management organizations from all the OECS countries that we held in St. Lucia. So the OECS, I would have to say, which is the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, for those of you who may not know, it's a smaller grouping within the CARICOM region. So the OECS is probably, I would say, a little more advanced in terms of regional planning for cross-border displacement due to disasters, because we've seen it happen. We've seen it happen after Hurricane Irma. The entire island of Barbuda had to be relocated to Antigua. A week later, we had Hurricane Maria. So you had people from Tortola moving, you had people from Anguilla moving, from Barbuda moving, you had people from Dominica. Dominica, the entire country was basically affected. So you had people from Dominica moving. And so it was a real first time experience of that kind of massive cross-border movement within the Eastern Caribbean. And so the governments have realized that, look, we kind of need to plan for this, because with climate change, this is potentially going to happen more often. And then what we saw in 2021 in St. Vincent was the eruption of the volcano. And on top of that came COVID. And on top of that came hurricane. So you had this multiplicity of potential disasters. You did not know what was going to happen with the volcano. How large was the eruption going to be? Was there going to need to be off-island evacuation? And so it really is something that the Eastern Caribbean governments, the OECS governments, have seen as a major priority. So there's been a ministerial declaration. IOM has been very involved in that work in terms of raising the awareness of all the human security issues that surround displacement. And now the conversation is kind of expanding through wider into the CARICOM states. So yes, it is something that we are advocating very much in terms of those broader impacts of disaster displacement.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I do hope there was a question says, are these stories on the IOM Caribbean YouTube channel? I do hope, because these stories need to reach a wider audience. And I remember, from Kville, listening to some of my friends who went through that Maria situation and listening to them. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to learn, that there are movements that are out there reaching persons. Another important question from Amanda Harris Logie said, what about disabled persons that are displaced during natural disasters? What about them? Are initiatives being put in place for them? And I'm going to ask Dr. Paula to respond to this, because I remember she spoke about the ramps that were there at the schools, because a lot of shelters around the Caribbean, they don't really have ramps. Bathrooms are not well suited for persons with disabilities. So Dr. Henry, you could touch on that a little bit for us.
Okay, yeah, I will touch on that. But I have a question. I will touch on that because we realize the importance of taking care of disabled persons is something we must plan short term and long term. But I actually have a question for is it Maria?
Maxine?
The last person who presented, right? No,
Maxine,
I can't
yes.
remember the person who talked about disabled persons, because actually I just did a study in Barbuda, um, um, Hurricane Irma, 6 years later. And one of the things we found out from talking to the persons who had to undergo forced migration was that there was no real system in place for vulnerable populations. You know, there was the population at large, but there was no systems in place for vulnerable populations, including people with mental health disorders. So I would like the panel to tell me a little bit more about that, because we're now writing on the study.
Well, I'm not sure who spoke about. I didn't specifically speak about people with disabilities, but yes, it is an area that we are kind of looking more into, and we are sort of strengthening our relationships with CSOs, with NGOs that are dealing with people with disabilities. So that's an area that we are sort of beginning to go more deeply into. But we do see that definitely from for instance, a communication standpoint, that our disaster communications tend not to take people with disabilities into account. And so they end up moving very last minute, or not moving at all, because sometimes they're not even aware of what is going on. Um, um, we also see that, well, in Dominica, for sure, with the new emergency shelters that are being built, because they're purpose built as emergency shelters, they're being built with accessibility in mind. But it is definitely an issue that, throughout the Caribbean, we are not where we need to be.
So thank you
But
for
we can
that,
talk
because
more
it's
on
one
we
of
can
the
talk more on that.
things. Yeah, one of the things we're trying to come out of this research that we're doing is to develop policies to deal with the vulnerable population, women especially. Yes, thank you very much. Nicole, who spoke about that, we found that as a problem. And so for women and girls, and also the vulnerable population, to trying to get policy change out of that from Antigua Barbuda. We're trying to let the paper speak to that. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Henry and Miss Maxine, for that. Emma Lois have a question. She asks, what role did NGOs and community-based organizations, play in the evacuations in Dominica and resettlements? I think it was Maxine who basically, the video that was played highlighting the different stories for the persons. Do you have an idea of what roles the NGOs or the community-based organizations played in the evacuations and resettlements of the people there?
What I do know is that what is called local government, which would be the village council system, which is very strong in Dominica. The village councils played a vital role in identifying people, and in sort of feeding information to the national system and to the international organizations as well, as to who were some of the most vulnerable people who needed to be, needed rebuilding and that kind of thing. So that's what I can say. I know as well that strong associations such as the Dominica Association of People with Disabilities was very engaged as well.
Thank you so much. And the last question for all panelists, I'm going to ask you guys just to be very brief with your response as we wrap up the Q&A. And the question is, I want everyone to provide one key recommendation for boosting resilience. I'm going to start with Mrs. Nicole Joseph Chen. Miss Chen, over to you. Mrs. Chen, sorry, over to you. What's one recommendation that
So
you
that one recommendation will be, let's collaborate. Collaboration solves everything. It does.
Love that. Love that. All right, we're going to move right along. Dr. Henry, what's yours?
Okay, so my one recommendation is, yes, it is important to do recovery short term, right away at the disaster, but we also need to think of long term recovery. from the people, not just, yeah.
Thank you very much. Miss Maxine, what's yours?
Mine would be that in considering relocation and displacement and that kind of thing, that we must consider not only the physical needs and the physical vulnerability of the area, but also individual needs and human security.
Thank you very much. Karina, what's one word you would say to boost resilience? What's your one word? Can you hear us?
Yeah, sorry. One word, I say local community and traditional knowledge.
Love that. Local community and traditional knowledge. Is Ivy still with us?
I'm here.
Perfect. Ivy, what's your one word to boost resilience?
Mine is actually a statement.
Mhm.
Let's keep the conversation going.
All right. We love that. Let's keep the conversation going. And what a great way to close day one of our 3-day session. And so, as we wrap up tonight's session, we just want to say this is how we build and will continue to build resilience. Together, all the voices that you heard tonight prove to us that guess what? Resilience, it's not just a concept, it's lived every day. Thank you to our phenomenal speakers, our sponsors, and most importantly, Miss Derval and Dana Lynn for, turning this into a great experience. And guess what? We want you guys to rest up because tomorrow we're back with even more energy for power in her hands. You don't want to miss it. Derval, Denalyn, over to you guys.
Hi, Doreen. I thought you handled that so well. We were just all ready to say goodbye. So let me just echo what you just said in thanking everyone for such a phenomenal, dynamic, insightful, enriching presentation. And thank you so much to our audience. Ivy, I want to say a special thank you as well, given the significant time difference. We're so appreciative of what just unfolded now. And I think you did it best, Doreen. So we just want to encourage everyone to join us tomorrow. Our special keynote speaker will be on Kendra Ferguson from the Bahamas, who is a sustainability and climate resilience specialist. And join us for our panel discussion, another insightful and riveting one it promises to be. Power in her hands, cultivating equity and climate solutions in the global south. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening or morning, and see you tomorrow for day 2.